It's behind me.
All right, good morning, guys. I'm excited to introduce Katherine Williamson. She is the person in charge of all the education with our Beyond the Spectrum program here at Children's, and she's going to be talking to us about how that program interacts with us on a day-to-day basis, and specifically our trauma and burn population. Thank you so much, Katherine. And also we have Tonia Johnson from the OR and PACU, and we have Jen Smell from the pediatric ICU. And then of course you have me, Cindy. All right, go ahead.
Awesome, thank you. Wonderful. So yeah, today we're going to talk about, what I do in the hospital is I'm an occupational therapist. And so I work with kids outpatient, I work with kids inpatient, and then I work with kids in every ambulatory clinic as well. So what that looks like is kids that are healthy, that have autism or developmental disabilities, that are struggling going to school or getting dressed or participating with their siblings. They come to outpatient and we work on really kids being as independent as possible. And then on the inpatient side, it's kind of the same. Is like, I'm going to make you as independent as possible while you're in our hospital so that you can access your medical care and then get out. Uh-oh. Sorry, hi, from recording. I now have, this is a stat call. Hold on 1 second. Ooh. Hey, I'm good. Did she come? Okay. I have a girl who is coming for a CT scan, and the first 2 tries, the first time she actually really hurt a nurse in CT. The second time she got highly aggressive and wasn't able to have the anesthesia that she needed to get her procedure. And so my job is to actually work with child life, CT, the doctor, the nurse navigator, everyone else, so that she's safe coming literally from the parking lot through to get her procedure in the PACU when she wakes back up. And often what happens is these kids, well, as you all know in your units, can be really aggressive and can be very dangerous and very scary. And it's my job in the hospital to help educate everybody around them and to educate families and to put plans in place so that these kids are actually able to access their medical care. When we did some digging with this patient in particular, we found out that they've not been able to actually see many of their providers. And yeah, that's my job. So I work with Dr. Atmore and Eileen Walters and Andrea. Dr. Atmore is she's our clinical director and she's a neuropsychologist, and she does mostly inpatient consult stuff and then helps develop all the teams. And then Eileen is our program manager. So really, I just want to start off with what is autism and what do you all know about autism? What do you know about developmental disabilities? What have you seen? What have you heard? Anybody?
I think of the sensory issues, and it's a different way that we deliver care. Usually a child responds to touch, and that might not always be the best thing with a child. And I think you've made a good point that each child is different, but it's the sensory things that I think of.
Yeah, right. Some of these kids are going to have different sensory stuff where they don't like to be touched, or they do like to be touched, or they like certain noise, or they don't like noise. Yep, kids on the spectrum and with developmental disabilities have all different kinds of sensory needs. Okay, what else?
Sometimes they don't like certain noises, as you mentioned. They become attached to certain items. Certain items comfort them, while other items they tend to shy away from or fear.
Yeah, absolutely. These kids can have preferences all across the spectrum, right? I have some kids who typically like what you would think is, they really love a teddy bear and they have to carry it everywhere. And then I have who's just loves this dry erase marker. And he is so obsessed and he has to have, and mom has 100 of the same kind of the same color because he's got to have a dry erase marker. And who loves his measuring cups. Needs to have a measuring cup with him, quarter cup, white plastic all the time. And that's just what it is, and that's what they need. So yeah, they have interesting, unique preferences. Okay, anybody else? What do you know about kids with developmental disabilities or autism? Or have you heard or seen?
Sometimes I think it's difficult to predict how they'll respond in different situations. And as a provider, that can be intimidating.
Yeah, it can be really intimidating because they are unpredictable, and they often, some of them on the spectrum, like really can't communicate in a way that we understand. So what looks like they're excited and happy all of a sudden turns around to someone getting hit. You're like, wait, I had no idea that that meant that they were upset. I thought that they were excited. And it can be really unpredictable. And in like a split second, someone can be calm and happy sitting in the neuroscience waiting room, and the next minute really slamming their head against the wall. And everyone's like, whoa, what happened in between? And the main point of this is just like, it is on an entire spectrum. And in our hospital, we're gonna have kids that are gonna come through that have disabilities, intellectual, developmental, autism, and we're never gonna know. They're gonna be able to get their lab drawn. They're gonna be able to follow their precautions, whatever that it is, and they won't need us, and we won't know. And then you're also gonna have kids who are highly aggressive and can be very scary. And parents, you know, it's scary for parents, scary for the kid, and scary for providers. Can be really tall, they can be really big, and they can definitely be dangerous. So yeah, we've got a whole spectrum. And what we're going to talk about today is how these kids in this population requires external support to process sensory information, just like we said, to adapt to new or unexpected events, which is basically everything that's going to happen specifically in your population, right? Trauma and burn and ICU care, you almost can never predict that that's going to happen or prepare a child for that. And then we're going to talk about how they need external supports to express wants and needs. And by external support, I mean all different kinds of things. Us, visual schedules, different environments. You know, one of the cool parts about being an OT is we're trained in school that nothing is wrong with the child or nothing is wrong with the person, just the environment and the task isn't set up for them to be successful. So again, if like the whole world as human beings, we were designed to be in wheelchairs, no one would go to the beach for vacation. Just like wouldn't even be a thing. There would be these other paradises that were created that would all be wheelchair accessible because everybody was in a wheelchair. Same thing if you think about going to a bar. The height of the bar would never be the way that it is. It's designed for a certain type of person. So we're gonna look at, you know, in the trauma, in the PICU, in the, you know, neuro floors, I have a luxury that in outpatient, I can see a kid for up to a year. Every week, I send homework, parents work on things. We actually work on altering the kids' skills. But in your situations and where you all are, it's not a time for kids to learn new skills. We don't want to actually be focusing on them taking on using a new communication device or being able to sign a new sign. It's traumatic, it's stressful, they're sick, and they're only going to be here for maybe, you know, 1 to 2 weeks or hopefully a couple of days. So we're going to look at how we can change the environment and the task for these kids to be really successful while they're here, given their skill set. So first thing I want to talk about is sensory integration. Anybody heard this word? No? Okay. So it's like, I could literally talk for days about this. It's so great. You all are doing this all the time. Your brain is taking in sensory information nonstop. Your sweatshirt, my glasses, your earrings, your socks. There might be light going on. You might have, you know, you're working from home. You've got kids. You've got the smell of breakfast that you just cooked. Maybe you only got 4 hours of sleep and you're tired, or you missed breakfast, or you drank too much coffee. You're getting all this input all the time. And your brain is really practiced at filing it away neatly so you can listen to me. Now, if all of a sudden you have a daughter in the background who drops the cereal bowl and you hear it and it crashes, you're not going to actually be able to file that away. You're going to turn around, react, and deal with what there is to deal with. But it's, you know, your skin is sending information to your brain that you have socks on, or maybe you have slippers on or whatever, but you actually aren't going to react to it every time because you filed it away. Now, if we were to take your watch that I wear on my left hand and you put it on your right hand, or if you remember back when if you got engaged or you got married and you all of a sudden had a ring on your finger, your brain, it takes a while. You're like, oh my God, there's a ring, there's a ring, there's a ring. And about 3 days later, it's filed away neatly so you don't have to deal with it. And these kids have a really difficult time filing things away neatly. And they don't file them in the way that most of us do. And what that looks like is then really kind of behaviors to deal with the fact that they can't file things away. So, if we were going to do this presentation and all of you, we had you get dressed up in your formal wear and you had to put on pantyhose and a strapless dress and you had your strapless bra on, everybody would, you could like watch people start to have to deal with that they couldn't file away that type of clothing. We work in a hospital, we get to wear scrubs. It's easiest to file away, but we label it as comfortable. And you can actually think of things that are comfortable as easy to file away. Is that making sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so when things aren't able to file away, it's really frustrating and it's really hard to pay attention. If your alarm in your house was going off and I said, no, just let the alarm go, pay attention to me. It would be much more difficult to listen to what I have to say. And you probably wouldn't be able to participate or engage. You might be able to tolerate it, but you certainly wouldn't learn from what I had to say if your fire alarm was going off. Yeah. So when you look at these kids, a lot of times, and you can look at us as well. We're on a spectrum, and some kids hyper responsive. The cup is too small. Right? And they just a little bit of information and it overflows and you have upset. I happen to be on the spectrum of the realm of a smaller cup. Now, I'm an adult and I'm trained and I'm practiced, but I prefer less information. I don't really like loud music. I don't really like to be touched. I'm not the person that's going to run into my office on Monday and hug all of my coworkers. A person that likes a good 1.5 foot distance. And an example of how that works is, when I was first dating my husband, he loves to hold hands and to touch, he just loves it. And so we'd be out in public holding hands, at an art museum or at getting ice cream. And my brain would be going, oh my God, you're holding hands. Why are you holding hands? It's kind of sweaty. Can I move my hand? I don't know. I don't want to hold hands. I don't want to. And and I couldn't be with the enjoyment of being on a date. Now, 2 years later, I practiced at it and I can file that away and I actually now really enjoy it. But I have a smaller cup. Same thing with the sense of smell. My mother-in-law loves Yankee candles. Y'all know those candles?
Mm-hmm.
Literally has 7 different smells burning in her house at all times. I walk in and I'm nauseous because it's vanilla, ocean breeze, cinnamon, whatever, you name it. And I it makes me feel sick. Now, I just know she has a huge cup, right? She loves things that smell. People that have big cups love spicy food. They're the people that will turn up the music and you're like, could you just turn it down? But they're like, yeah, this is so great. And as adults, if you look in your life, you've set up your world based on where you are. Those of us that have smaller cups, we really like dinner parties and going to coffee. Those with giant cups are at the club. They like music, 100-person concert. That's where they can just yeah, exactly. And we're all different. But the cool part is we can adjust and adapt. I can easily be at a 100-person conference. There's just things that I need to do that I know to do that I don't think about so that I can be a part of that whole group. I work out in the morning. I make sure that I have food. I take pee breaks. I get water. But if you notice when you're not in an environment that's really set up for you, you go home and you're like, oh my gosh, I just need a minute. Because your cup has been so full. And you can take things out of your cup during the day. You'll notice that as well. So your cup gets full, you'll be like, oh my God, I just need to close my door and breathe for 5 minutes. Or sometimes you'll go all day and you won't even realize it's so full. And if you know, go to Target and you watch the return line and like the woman says, I'm sorry, I can't take this. And the person just like starts bawling. It's not that they can't return something. It's that person's had so much loaded into their cup all day that that last little bit of upset overflows. And we've all been there. Everyone's been on the edge. And it's the last little piece that's so not a big deal that just sends you overflowing. And these kids, we never know where they are in their cup. We don't even know what size cup they have, but they're often constantly right on the edge of about to overflow. And it really may be the air conditioning system that turns on, or the toilet that flushes, or the hair dryer that goes off, or the bag of chips that somebody opens that is just enough to like send them over. And what I'm about to show you, well, let me check in. What are you guys hearing? What is this making sense? What do you think? Where do you notice what size is your cup?
You know, I never thought about the spectrum like this, but it makes total sense. And it makes sense for me. I have a gigantic cup, but I have a lot of friends with really small cups. Yep. And now I'm like, oh, that's why I'm like, ah, and they're like, God, stop it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. And we make up stories about it of like, oh, well, I'm just outgoing, or I'm gonna, and it's like, actually, no, my body needs more input. I have a gigantic cup for what we call proprioceptive input, which is heavy work. You know, the cool part about your brain is when it all gets really loud and there's so much going on, we can naturally calm ourselves down. And we do that by heavy work or proprioceptive input, which is how our body feels grounded. So if you're like to take a second, and if you're sitting in your chair, just like start marching your feet really hard. March your feet, march your feet. Okay, get faster and harder and faster and harder and more. Stop. Okay, that sensation is proprioceptive input. You've just given your body a sense of groundedness. We're all sitting, so we're getting it through our legs and our butt, and it's letting us know where we are. And it actually has you feel grounded. So if you were to, you know, go skydiving and fall out of a plane, you have very minimal proprioceptive input. So you have a lot of anxiety and fear and excitement because you don't know where you are in space. And so we use this input like to help ourselves calm down. So you think about it, no one in the history of being told to calm down calms down, right? Like usually you have the opposite of reaction of, you can't tell me, calm down, blah, 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 blah. The way that we calm down is we do something. You literally come in, you hug yourself, you go for a walk, you clean your house, you talk to somebody. You have to do something to help yourself regulate. And that's why weighted blankets are all the cool rage for anxiety, right? So if you don't have enough proprioceptive input, you often feel anxious or like flighty or light or not connected because you're not grounded to the earth. A weighted blanket organizes all the noise and has you back grounded. Another way to explain this is when you're going to bed at night and you lay down and all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, my sock is off, my jammies are this, the light is on, the fan is going, and you like are attuned to all this sensory information. You pull those heavy covers over and it just quiets everything. And you're able to go to sleep. That's why these kids often, you'll see their behaviors, they have, you know, if they have too much going on, too much in their cup, not enough in their cup, they're gonna try and help regulate that. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Yep.
Cool. So I'm gonna show you a video of two different kids. The first kid has a really, really small cup. Oh, this guy. So all that is shaving cream. Look how anxious he is. Woo!
It's like, I'm not having it.
Right. Woo! He's on the spectrum and he's nonverbal, but it's very clear he like cannot handle this.
Uh-huh.
Gonna leave.
Right. He's like, y'all are crazy. I'm not interested.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
It's like, no thanks.
Yeah. So he, imagine trying to give this kid a bath or to
Mm-hmm.
try and have him eat anything that's not a chip.
Mm-hmm.
I'll wipe it up.
Maybe he's a neat freak like me.
Yeah. Right.
That's messy.
Yeah. Right. And
He's
often,
cleaning.
he is
and
clean.
often neat freaks have really small cups because they just can't deal with and be with the mess. They don't like the sensation of it. They don't like visually seeing. Like we say, people that are organized, it's actually the visual stim that like they can't be with, of like something that's messy. It's just too put. So
Clearly I'm a small cup.
yeah, and you just set up your life that way. And then when someone comes and like tears it all apart, you're like, oh, what are you doing?
Yeah, I want to take him out back and
Yeah, exactly. And so, this was something where like you're in your ICUs, you've got to have an EEG done. You've got to put gel on this kid. You've got to Band-Aid or whatever. You're going to have someone who's so anxious.
Mm-hmm.
And most people won't know why.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine putting cardiac leads on him. He couldn't be with stickers. He couldn't
Mm-hmm.
be. And so we're just like getting the lens of, not that you're not going to do those things, just like looking at why he might show up the way he's showing up. Is his cup is really small. He also, in social situation, was not exposed to sensory input. Right? After this, I'm gonna explain to you kind of why these kids are the way that they are. But this guy has a huge cup. Just like, yes. So he came to me because he was licking kids in school and the bus and the floor and was doing anything he could to get input.
Oh.
Also, both of them nonverbal, but totally communicating what they need.
Mm-hmm.
And so the cool part about cups and your preferences and everything else is like, you can work on expanding a cup or shrinking a cup or actually having you be responsible for it. And that's what I do in outpatient therapy is we actually take these kids that have these like just bottomless glasses and actually help them get the input they need to regulate it. And the same, if you have a really, you can actually work to make it bigger. And then with kids that are verbal, we really work on them explaining to people what's going on, when they get overwhelmed, why they get upset. A lot of kids, if somebody brushes them in class and you have a really little cup, feels like a huge assault. So they turn around and shove some kid and now they're in detention because they're a bad kid because they hit somebody. When actually they're just like, can't deal with the other kid who's got this huge cup who's like bumbling around, running into the walls, like touching everybody, has now set off the other kid. My sister and I growing up, I have a small cup. My sister has a giant cup. She would purposely come and sit right next to me because she loves that. She was the kid who like had rocks in her pockets and she just like loved, and I was just like, get your rocks off. Like, don't touch me. And you watch between your kids or your family members, when you have different sensory preferences that aren't distinguished, it causes upset. People get like fussy with each other. So one of the things about these kids is ours isn't an issue until like you can't be with what you need to do, right? I can go be in a crowd. You can deal with a messy room. You could, you know, whatever that you needed to do, you can function. These kids on the spectrum and with developmental disabilities are sometimes not able to function. And that becomes a problem, is that, you know, you need to sit down and wait in your emergency department, and you have a kid who's like so wound up that they're pulling everything off your walls, they're slamming their head, which you think about is a great way to get proprioceptive input. You can't deal with what's going on in the outside world. Giving yourself deep pressure, hitting your head against the wall, actually is a form of self-regulation. Same thing when they bite their hand. They bite their hand really hard, and you'll notice they have like knobs and gnarls on their hands. It's typically because they're trying to calm themselves down. Same thing with this kind of stimming behavior. You know, these are all of them. There's lots of them. But if the outside world is so visually overstimulating, you just, you know, cut your visual gaze and only look at your hand. It's a way to calm down everything else that's going on. Same thing with grinding your teeth. That, I think it sounds so terrible, but if it's too loud, you can just start to grind and calm yourself back down. Let's see. So there's one last thing. What did I want to say about this? Oh, the other thing is external stimuli is one thing, but internal stimuli, it's called interoception, how in tune you are to yourself and your body. So again, you can have a big or small cup depending on how in tune you are to your internal state. So I also happen to have a smaller cup. So if I'm really tired, if I eat something that doesn't make me feel good, like I get lethargic, I get tired, I have a headache. My husband is a garbage can. He can literally eat whatever, he can like kind of sleep, and he's like, I'm fine, it's not a big deal. The same thing is like, you all are nurses, you work in trauma, it must happen all the time. You are literally like headed to the bathroom, you have to pee, and then something happens. Stat page, trauma this, blah, that, yada, yada. And then all of a sudden, it's like 3.5 hours later, your bladder keeps sending the signal. It's not that your bladder stopped sending something to your brain. It's just that your outside world was so overstimulating, you weren't present to what's going on inside of you internally. Until you hit that like 3.5 hour mark and you're like, if I don't get to the bathroom, I'm literally going to inappropriately pee the floor, and all of y'all better get out of my way because I'm coming through. And you like get upset, and you like get like something happens, and then you have to go take care of yourself. It's the same thing with eating. You're hungry, and I hear nurses all the time. It's like 4 in the afternoon, and they're like, oh my God, I forgot to eat. My brain's like, no, but their outside world was so overstimulating. Your stomach totally sent you reminders. But they've got so much going on, they're not paying attention to that internal thing until they have a headache, they feel fatigued, they get like really grouchy. You can notice that too in yourself. You're like, oh, wait, why did I just react that way? Oh, I haven't eaten in 3 hours. I have to pee. I didn't sleep very well. Let me like reel that back in. Kids on the spectrum and with developmental disabilities don't necessarily have that ability to tell you. So kids with trauma showing up in your ED literally may not have eaten in the past 8 hours, and they're not going to tell you or show any sign that they need to eat. They may not all have slept very well overnight. Kids that are on the spectrum have a lot of sleep issues. So not only are you getting a kid that's dealing with a trauma or a sickness, you've got someone who probably could have maybe just had like a chicken nugget and some Diet Coke on 3 hours of sleep in your room with 100 other people, and you're going, how do you feel? I need you to calm down. Right? Like, it kind of starts to make sense about why they would be up, screaming, running, whatever. And we often confuse their like hyper arousal with like energy. They're actually mostly fatigued and exhausted. And if you look past the busyness, you can see a kid who's so run down, but they can't calm down to be able to like transition to sleep. And that's like a whole other lecture. But all right, let me check in. What are you guys hearing, getting, seeing?
can you hear me, guys?
Yeah.
I can appreciate back when you talked about what type of cup we have. Mine is a full cup, but if you guys can see my bracelet and watch, I wear on my left. But if I put my bracelet on my right, like I can't do any work at my desk because it's just overstimulating where I can't file it away. So I've learned if I'm going to wear it, I have to wear it on the other side. It seems very small, but that's something I can process and know what works for me. But on the other hand, when we do have these patients and, you know, we don't know them because we're just, like you said, meeting them for the first time and knowing what makes them tick, what makes them upset is hard because it's kind of again, where you're trying to figure it out. But I really appreciate the format in which you present this so we can all see that we have some level where we can be on the spectrum, and it's just how we process those, you know, sensory things that, you know, coming to us. So it's really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. We all have weird tweaks. There's just, we hide them. You know, these are stimming behaviors, right? Stimming behaviors are up here. They're a calming, well, they're a continuous and repetitive behavior that's used to calm or distract. So the rocking, it's continuous, it's repetitive. Now, if you get on the shuttle after work and go home, everyone is stimming. Let me pull out my phone, and it is this calming, repetitive behavior. It's called scrolling. You have a bad day, you get upset, you need to calm down. You don't even think about it anymore. You just whip out your phone, your brain somehow selects an app, whether it's a game or Instagram or Facebook, and you're literally until you're calmed back down. Now, there's like a whole other side of that, of like how that adds to anxiety and upset, because you're not sitting there dealing with like, wow, you know, I said that to Lisa today and I'm upset, and maybe I shouldn't have said that to Lisa. I kind of like jumped down her throat. That didn't really work. Like, I'm actually not practicing that. You just literally distract yourself, calm yourself down, and then go on about your day. And these kids.
So is it better to allow the behavior that, how do you know if it's over or under? I mean, either way, it's a calming behavior, but I guess as long as they're not hurting themselves, you let them continue the behavior, but how do you know how to help it? In other words, like if they're overstimulated, you want to try to reduce the stimulation. They're doing whatever they need to do to fix their, to self-regulate, but how can we, I might be jumping ahead, I guess.
No.
How can we contribute to helping it?
Yeah, so what you can start to do is I use them as indicators. If you start seeing stimming behaviors, I'm like, okay, something's off. This kid's having a hard time. What do I need to do to start to make a difference for this kid? And that's when I start looking in the environment. Are there 3 TVs on? Are there, 14 residents in the room? Is mom yelling on the phone in the corner? Is the leftover meal from this morning's breakfast like sitting on across the bed up under his nose, like still giving him that stim? How can I start to move things around? What are his pain meds looking like? Is it a sign that he's, pain is showing back up? I start using them as a cue. I definitely, unless it's like highly aggressive and detrimental to themselves or to somebody else, I take that as like, okay, something's off. What can I do to change the environment or the task? And that's the tough part, is you're never going to necessarily know in the first 5 minutes whether it's under, over, or yes or no. But you can start to experiment with different things. Like maybe I turn the lights off. Let's see what that does. Let me reduce the volume. Let's see what that does. Let me remove this. Let me offer, one of the things I always do is I always offer kids to put on their own clothes. Like there's those gowns with like half a button, unflapped over, they're scratchy, they're big, there's a reason y'all like spandex, right? Like spandex gives you proprioceptive input. It feels good, helps you feel regulated and ready to go. Go do your own clothes. And so, putting cardiac leads on their back, putting a pulse on your toe with a sock over it, then allows the brain not to process the pulse sock, but processing the pressure from the sock that you put on. And we'll go through different kinds of recommendations. And I think that's where it's also good for me to hear what your environments look like. You know, in these trauma rooms, can you have wipeable blankets? Could we use like even just like an x-ray blanket? Could you lay that across somebody who's getting ready to have 19 million things happen to them so that they could just have some heavy weight across their body to keep it calm, to help keep them calm? I also get you are in a realm where things are just going to be traumatic. You're not going to be able to eliminate everything based on the nature of what has to happen. And how could we add those in? Could you have headphones that start to play music or that are noise canceling, that take out everybody else's voices so that it's just quiet while everything else is going on? Could you, you know, those are things that I begin to offer. And we have a whole cart of tons of different things, and you can start to play with, you know, aromatherapy. I have some kids who like absolutely are in love with like these little pods, and like it just does whatever it needs to do. And some kids that are like literally squish it, throw it on the ground and have no interest, and they want the like weird little ball that they can just start to do this with. There is no one right answer, and hopefully in starting to, like, when you see a kid, you'll start to see the difference, and you can watch what happens by coming from this lens. That, I know that wasn't like a concrete answer, but does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's one of these things is when you're looking for these kids, especially in the world where you all work, is like they wake up and think they're going to school with it. They have aids, they have pictures, they have certain things about how it's going to go. And then all of a sudden they're here. You think about, I don't know if you can ever remember back to your first day of work, but your first day of work, most people died around like 2:30 in the afternoon because you're processing so much information. What do I say? Where do I sit? Where do I eat lunch? Can I talk to that person? Can I not talk to that person? What is that person's name? You meet so many people, and our hospital setting is like that. Nothing is expected. You're meeting 20 to 40 individuals, different people that you've never seen that kind of remotely look the same, but not quite. You don't feel good, your body hurts, people are touching you. It's like really uncomfortable. If you have a day of doctor's appointments, you come home and you're just like, I don't like being examined. I don't like being touched. And it could happen to you every 20 minutes in some of our situations. And so, you know, none of us do well with unexpected events. Nobody. If you were to wake up tomorrow morning and walk outside and your tire was flat, no one would be happy. Some people are over here and they scream and curse. Other people like me cry. I cry, right? You got one or the other. No one walks outside and is like, yes, AAA, I get to call AAA today. It's going to be so great. Just set my morning off right. Doesn't happen. Things that are, we wake up and we like things to go, they're going to go. COVID is a fabulous example. It is literally thrown a massive wrench in everybody's day. People are exhausted, not because they're sick, nothing's happened, and it's dealing with the unexpected, moment to moment, new policy, new meeting, emergency this, what's the next protocol, what do we do? No one can get a routine going. All last week was this, and people showed up looking like this because it was hard to deal with and to be with, and that's what these kids' lives are like. If you're not getting communicated to and you don't understand what's going on, moment to moment to moment, it's something new, it's something unexpected. And your brain is then going to, how do I show up? What should I do? What's appropriate? Oh, that's not appropriate. Oh, that's not appropriate. Oh, and literally they're told no, 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 no. Then finally they get a like, yay, great job. And they're like, wait, where did that come from? Why was that good and this wasn't? And the other thing about this is, again, if you go back and you add in about sensory processing, you know, if you were to wake up, you know, the night before, you won $10,000, you just got engaged, you got a new job, you had coffee, you slept 8 hours, and you walked outside and your tire was flat. would be very different than if you lost $10,000, just got broken up with, slept 3 hours, have like swollen, crying eyes, and your tire's flat, right? Like your level of reaction would be totally different. And that's what you also got to remember about these kids. They're coming in, they haven't eaten. And there's no way often that they're going to eat anything that's offered in this hospital. They're selective, they're picky, they have sensory preferences. They only eat chicken nuggets from the McDonald's on the left side of the road, on the right side of town, and it has to be drive-through, and they've got to be cut a certain way, and that's the only way they'll eat something. Otherwise, they just won't. So you have hangry, tired, sick kids, and we're trying to ask them to like add on all these more things to do. And not saying you're not going to ask them to do it. It's just like, this is what the background we want you to be thinking about when you approach this kid. Because one of the things that comes up is, well, I'll get to, let me just skip ahead really quick. Because one of the things that comes up is like, what happens to us, right? You have long days, your cup is full. These nurses, I mean, they're absolute heroes, and they're brilliant, and they work all day, and they deal with people's trauma and upset nonstop. And then you have a kid who has these like very bizarre behaviors. It can often occur like they're trying to do something to you, that they're being bad, that they don't care. Like, you know, if they could just not lick the wall, if they could just not pull this down, you know, you got to put the pulse ox on for the 27th time, right? It like wears on other people. And one of the things I really want to get is like, it's okay that it annoys you. I love this population. I've like dedicated all my work and everything to it. And they still get under my skin sometimes. You know, I have a kid who walks around and puts his spit on every single surface. It like, after 10 minutes, sometimes I just walk out of the room and I take a deep breath and then I go back in. And one of the things to really get is that these kids aren't doing these behaviors to upset you. Often they have no idea that it's even impacting you. And if you can keep that present while you're dealing with the upset and the lack of communication, none of it's ever intentional to you. There's just something going on either internally with them or externally in the environment that has them behaving this way. And to give yourself some grace of like, okay, let me take a deep breath. Let me go for a walk. Let me get something out of my cup so I can come back around and really be great with this kid. Because they sometimes take some extra stuff, and they're not going to be the ones that are going to run up to you and hug you and say thank you. It is just not how it goes. So how are we doing on time? Okay. Anybody have questions from that part? Comments?
I just have a quick question.
Yeah.
When you just described how we process their behavior, is there ever situations perhaps with kids with that are on with autism who maybe have a mental health component to it, that the behavior can be manipulative?
So,
or is that really just how they're processing and then we have to just adapt?
So I have it like, often there are lots of mental health components that come along with developmental disabilities and autism. Depression, anxiety, OCD, a lot of them can be wrapped up in it. This is a personal thing. I come from a space that there is no kid that wants to be bad or manipulative, like ever.
Makes sense, yeah.
There's just something has happened to them that has this behavior be there. And it's part of that movement of like looking at humans and kids to be like, you know, we're trained to think like what's wrong with them, and really looking at like what's happened to them. There's something in the way that their house environment, the way their brain is wired, the way that they've eaten, slept, sensory preference, that has them showing this behavior. And coming from that space gives me power in treating this population. I don't know if they are manipulating or not. Like it's sometimes really hard to tell, but if I come from that this kid is manipulating, I'm never able to make a difference with that kid. Because I get frustrated, I get annoyed, then you like try and use all these other different things to like stop the manipulation or have the kid present to that they're manipulating. And I find that I lose power. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah.
And not power by meaning force. I mean like power in like me being empowered to be with this kid to make a difference.
Yeah.
Because it can be a struggle and it can be really frustrating. And the feeling of being manipulated like really is upsetting. I don't like that. And then when I'm upset, then I don't respond well to that kid because I'm annoyed that this kid is doing something to me. But when I stand in a space that like, there's just something I haven't uncovered about this kid that would make a difference, then I get to explore and discover and yet to like actually be stopped in that realm. That was like more of a personal answer than like a, because I don't know clinically. That would be in the realm.
Yeah, no, I think that's helpful.
Yeah. One of the things, so in this, like thinking about communication, you know, one of the greatest parts about communication is you get to be heard and you get to be understood. And a lot of times this population is not heard and not understood. They're communicating non-stop. We're just not understanding what they're communicating. And when you think about your best friend, like your best friend in the whole world, sometimes like they're your best friend because on days when like this is going on, you can call them up and be like, I can't believe so-and-so did this, this, and this. And can you imagine this virus and humanity and blah, 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 and you can go on and on and on and on and on. And your best friend is the best because they go, I just can't believe it either. And rah, 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 rah. And you go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And 10 minutes later, it's like, you've used each other to co-regulate. Often that person doesn't even know who you're complaining about, but they don't care because they're your best friend and they just get that you're upset. So they get upset and it feels so good. And what we do with these kids and often is like a kid is upset and they're getting wound up and we say, calm down. You should calm down. Don't touch that. Calm down. And like, it never works. Because they're also not being gotten. And so one of the things that I always like work with nurses and is like actually get their experience. And by you being like, I'm so sorry, this is so scary. And you don't know any of us and you don't know what's going to happen to you, but I promise you're going to be okay. My voice, my body language, everything else changes. I have kids, you know, when you see them and they get really excited, you're like, oh my God, yes, 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 yes. I'm so excited to see you too. We're gonna have a great day. And that kid in turn, like, gets to feel heard and gets that another human being gets them. But often we're just like, so they don't speak, so they're not gonna understand. When you operate that way, they're totally not gonna get you because you're not getting them. You're not getting that they are miserable. They are so terrified. This is the worst day of their life. They have no idea what they're supposed to do. And there's literally, if you look at it, no way you can win. There's no way that kid is going to win. Because they just can't figure it out. And we've all been in situations where you feel like you can't win. And being defeated is just like the worst. And you will say what you need to say and do what you need to do to try and win. And it's often not very nice. So again, like if you walk into a room and you are smiling and you have some sort of item or something and you're like, I'm so excited to see you. I know you're scared, but we're going to get this taken care of. It sets the tone in a way that that kid all of a sudden is now connected to you. Does that make sense?
Is there, because I think that all of us have probably used the calm down technique before.
Totally.
None of us would ever want to ever be told calm down. Like that's the worst thing to hear if you're like worked up. If somebody's like, you need to calm down. You're like, you know what?
Yeah, exactly. Watch this.
Yeah, I'll show you calm down. Is there a phrase that that you have that we could remember that has worked? Like something that replaces, that we can like easily remember. Okay, like don't say calm down, but say,
you're okay is one that I use all the time. You're okay, it's okay. You're okay, it's okay. Because your voice is really, you can't be like, you're okay. You're okay, it's okay. Like the way that we say it. The other thing that's on here is like, when you're really upset and you're really worked up, new ideas just don't usually show up. You're usually so stuck in a certain way that things have to go, and someone will try and like contribute to you, and you'll be like, there's no way, that's not happening. Same with these kids. So if you say don't hit, don't pull, don't touch your leads, it actually like just reinforces that there are leads that they could hit, etc. So I always recommend, someone's hitting, give them something else to do. Show me safe hands. Can you hold this for me? Oh, leads stay on in the hospital. We just had a kid who had a femur or something on the 5th floor, and he was picking at his cast, and everyone kept being like, don't pick your cast, don't pick your cast. And then he would repeat, don't pick your cast, don't pick your cast, while he was picking his cast. If you alter that to cast stays on in the hospital, they're great with rules, and they're really like, what is a rule and what is like, okay, they're great. They want to follow the rules. And then, cast stays on in the hospital, cast stays on in the hospital. That he knows that like this thing has to stay on. Same thing with leads. Leads stay on in the hospital. IV stays in. When you go home, the IV comes out. That kind of communication like gives them something else. And it's the same thing. It works brilliantly with all kids, to be honest. If they're wound up and stuck perseverating in something, you just alter whatever's going on. Can you tell me about, what's your favorite color? Do you like blah, blah, blah? Redirects the brain to something else. This whole thing too about, so talking calmly and softly, just being happy and like getting that you get to smile, and that makes a huge difference. When I was 5 years ago in school, they were saying, kids and adults on the spectrum like wouldn't necessarily pick up on that, or they weren't paying attention to you. That is so not the case. They're hyper in tune to how you're being and how you're showing up. And if you're revved up and mom's revved up, they're going to get revved up. And if you're calm and mom's calm, 9 times out of 10, they're going to be calm. They're really in tune to you. The other thing too is like a good lesson just in life is to connect before you redirect. Typically what we do is we try to give like an order. We want something to happen, and we forget that we actually need to connect with that person, right? Like, and get in their world before we make a request. And we often just want to step back because it's faster to be like, hey, take out the trash. You didn't clean your room. I need you to do this, do that, blah, blah, blah. We'd actually be way more effective if we pause and look at like, hey, I get something's going on. I need you to do this. First this, then you can have your iPad. Which is on here, and like the best phrase that I use. First this, then this. Because often what we do is we go into bargaining and negotiating. Okay, take your medication, then you're going to be able to do this. And if we can do this, it's just a little bit, just in your mouth. Wait for a second. Hold on. If you could just sit still, take the. All that is a lot of auditory stim for them to process, and often leads to just more upset. So the simpler your words are, first medicine, then you can have your iPad. Oh, I know you're upset. I'd be mad too. Someone's taking my iPad away. First meds, then iPad. It might take you, this kid that we were calming down, took him 6 times of me being like, nope, first meds, then iPad. It only took 2 minutes and 30 seconds, but I kind of felt nutty because I kept saying it. And it was way better than them having to put in a new IV and start new IV meds. And then we started a pattern so that the nurse then was able to use that. First this, then this. And then he took his meds. But it's getting, this 15 second delay. I just pause. It's really awkward. And it's only awkward for us. It actually might be a gift for them. So if you can just be with yourself and let it be awkward, it actually gives them the space to process what you're asking. I talk so fast. I love to talk, you know, and if you can just pause, it makes all the difference. Same thing too, this is not up here, but last week they were actually having to hold him down because he got really aggressive. He was biting, etc. And everyone was using their hands. One of the #1 things I recommend is switching out your hands for a pillow. You can still hold down if you have to, hold somebody down, but put your hands on top of a pillow and then put the pillow on the kid. There's some fight or flight stim that happens when you are actually gripped. You notice if you like a kid, if you go to grab them, they'll like drop to the floor. They like you react in a certain way to being grabbed. And if you replace it with a pillow, you actually get that deep pressure that helps silence all the noise. And it also helps regulate you individually, because people, if you have to hold someone down, often you're not aware of the amount of force you're using because you're scared or you're upset or you're dealing with whatever that you're dealing with that has to hold somebody down in some sort of situation. And so the amount of pressure you use different than the person next to you, the next to you, next to you. So you have, 18 hands holding you, when if you just had pillows. And the minute we switched out the pillows, he started to calm down. And he actually like broke and he started sobbing, and he was so embarrassed that he had hurt these other people. And he was just like, he pulled the covers over his head. He didn't want to look at anybody, and he felt really bad. And so those techniques, if you're dealing with traumatic situations where you've got to hold somebody down, I would highly recommend using pillows. Praise and reward. You can only, I'm 4 minutes over. Oh my goodness.
You're okay.
I would just praise and reward. If you just think about these kids' lives, really, they're often in trouble. They're in trouble at school. They're in trouble at home. They can't get it right. And it's just so nice to just be like, I'm so proud of you. That was such a great job. Even if it's like nothing, it adds something to their world, and it helps you have them want to participate for you. So this is us. This is how you get in contact with us. We are here. We are working on ways to partner. The Beyond the Spectrum is working on ways to partner with you all, in the sense of, if you know you have a kid coming in, or you have a stat kid you don't know how to deal with, I'm here. I now have an ASCOM phone. I'm only here 8 to 4, Monday through Friday, but I am fully available. Dr. Atmore is as well, to come help with these kids and to help your teams problem solve and think about how to set up your environments to be really successful for them.
Does a child have to be diagnosed with autism for us to call you?
Nope.
Great. That's good to know. I mean, Tonia, Jen, or Lisa, did you even know that this existed?
No.
Well, no, I just wrote down the information.
What, Tonia?
I've worked with Eileen before for patients coming to the operating room several times.
Yeah, so we're here, and it's really, we're here for kids that are aggressive, that are not able to comply with what you want them to comply with, and that are gonna also just be like repeats, because a lot of kids are gonna need a bunch of stuff. So that's what we're here for, and this is how you get in touch with us. Yeah, and any safety reporting. If you guys don't have appropriate restraints, this was from a while ago, but Flora started to buy new restraints. If you feel like you don't, and you have to inappropriately restrain, if you report it, that helps us advocate for appropriate restraints.
Yeah, we did know about it on Neuro. We have used Katherine and her team quite often with our patients that's coming in. I think it's really good if we know in advance and they've already had a consult with the ABC team. It's helpful for us to know, how this kid best operates, what do they do, they don't. And it's usually nursing and child life that's made aware of that. And we also have a Beyond the Spectrum sensory card that was gifted to us through the ABC team that we use quite often for our patients on the floor. So yeah, they're great for us.
Yeah, that's something we can work with you guys too, is to get different sensory carts. That's like ideally the ultimate goal is you would have, we have noise canceling headphones and spinners and fidgets and like all kinds of different things that would be available for your nurses.
Catherine?
Yeah.
When you talked about people either having a cup that's too big or too small, are there times when you think, depending on the situation, you can switch? Like, I know
Totally.
mine is too small, but depending on the circumstance, can you blend a little bit?
You can be all over, and that's the tricky part to, you know, answer the earlier question, is it changes day to day, moment to moment. You know, everybody's cups last week got overflowed. I don't care how big or how small. Everybody was dealing with unexpected all the time. And people, the normal way that you regulate yourself, it got thrown out the window. People weren't eating out as well. You were eating different diet. You didn't get as much sleep as you needed. And you could watch people not be able to regulate themselves, which led to increased upset. Because that's all that actually is happening, is something unexpected happened. And now everybody's dealing that their routine, their normal way of being is disrupted.
Right.
So your cup can change all the time. And you can look at, like, when you don't do what you normally do, how that impacts your cup. And that's why we all rely on routine so much as human beings, is it helps keep our cup. You know, if you had to problem solve how to brush your teeth every morning and how to acquire a toothbrush and a toothpaste, that would already add like half to your cup. Into a routine that you don't have to think about, that's already handled, so that it doesn't add anything to your cup. And when all the little things are handled, then you can be creative and you can work on a team and you have all this extra space to deal with problem solving. Because the little,
like right now, we have to scheme how to get toilet paper.
yeah.
Seriously.
Seriously. But and that's like that, if you look at workability, right? Like that takes up a chunk of a cup.
Right.
Actually leaves less space to be available for what you need to do. Nothing wrong with it. It's just interesting to notice. Things aren't handled. What happened in the world? Yeah.
Okay.
This was great. Catherine, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you guys for listening, and I'm going to stop recording.